Marowak EX is a card that a lot of players turn to as an early deck, partially due to the fact that you get one for free if you start the game with the Mewtwo pack, but also because it can one-hit KO every card in the format outside of Stage 2 EXs for only 2 energy. Of course, this only happens if you flip double heads, so it's not a guaranteed knockout by any means, but it's still a solid enough build-around card. The question then is, what should you play with Marowak EX? I think the answer actually comes in the form of the promo Mankey card from the Lapras EX event. For 1 energy, Mankey deals 30 damage to the opponent and 10 damage to itself. On its own, the self-inflicted damage may seem bad, but it's actually good because of the Primeape from Genetic Apex, which for 2 energy does 40 damage, plus 60 if it has any damage counters on itself already. This means that if you go second with Mankey into Primeape, you're dealing a total of 130 damage by your second turn. This allows you to score turn 2 knockouts on meta EX attackers like Starmie, Zapdos, and Pikachu, as well as common non-EX leads like Weezing and, well, I mean the entirety of the Blaine deck. And it puts you 1 Giovanni away from taking key knockouts on 140 HP EXs like Marowak, Articuno, and Moltres. This all may sound great on paper, and it is, but there is a bit of a problem. Both Mankey and Primeape are extremely frail. Assuming you're going second and attacking with Mankey on your first turn, you're going to be sitting with only 40 HP. Now, Misty decks aside, Mankey's guaranteed to die against a lot of popular 1 energy attackers, such as Exeggutor EX, Rapidash, Weezing, and Farfetch'd. The frail nature of the strategy is highlighted even more if you have to go first though. With only 90 base HP, Primeape gets one-hit KO'd by many of the best 2 energy attackers in the format, including Ninetales, Starmie EX, Pikachu EX, and even the Mirror Match. So if you start with Mankey going first against any of these matchups, even if you evolve your Primeape, it's just going to die, so you're kind of forced to pivot it to your bench if you want to keep it alive. And even then, if you pivot to your bench, it's not going to have any damage counters on it, meaning if you bring it out later, you would still need a full turn of setup in order to be hitting 100 damage with it, which most decks aren't going to allow you to do that after the first few turns. So because of this, I found that more often than not, if you lead Mankey going first and you're up against one of these decks that can knock it out by their second turn, it's often beneficial to simply just accept that the Mankey's going to get knocked out and load all your energy up on a Marowak EX. Now, I have 2 example replays to show from my stream earlier today. The first match is against what I initially assumed was a standard Rapidash Ninetales Blaine list, and I'm going first and lead a Cubone. I'm going to start my turn with a Professor's Research, and then I'll bench a Cubone and a Mankey before eventually passing. Now, even going second, Primeape is usable in the Blaine matchup because it can't get one-hit KO'd by Rapidash. Ninetales one-hit KOs it, but even with Blaine, Rapidash doesn't. So you can kind of play around that. The problem, though, is that you can't use Mankey to set up the damage in that scenario because Rapidash will just KO it for 40. So you have to have Primeape tank a hit, which is obviously not great because it's slow and the opponent can just kind of decide not to hit it unless it's a one-hit KO. At this point, though, I realize they're actually playing Arcanine, probably instead of Ninetales, so I start to debate here whether to build up Primeape or Marowak EX. If I retreat into Mankey and attack and they have Rapidash, they're just going to knock out my Mankey. Arcanine EX, for reference, hits 120 damage while dealing 20 to itself, which isn't enough to knock out Marowak EX, so I decide on using Primeape at first, since Marowak will be able to tank a hit later, while Primeape could not, and they're going to have to waste a lot of time powering up Arcanine EX, and in the meantime, I'm going to try to bait them into attacking Primeape with a Rapidash. Now, if they have Rapidash, the Cubone inactive is going to die, which I think is probably not a huge deal at first, because I'm ideally hoping to make them have to take 4 prizes anyways in order to win the game. They don't have Rapidash, though, so they just attach an energy to Arcanine EX and then attack for 20 with Ponyta. I'm going to start with a Research again, drawing into another Marowak EX and Mankey. I'm going to hold that Mankey in hand for a bit, actually, which is going to come up later. I'll then attach a Primeape, retreat back into it via X speed. I'll then evolve the fresh Cubone into a Marowak EX because it needs to be able to tank 1 Arcanine hit before eventually just attacking Ponyta for 40 with Primeape. My opponent is going to continue to slowly build up their Arcanine while kind of dancing around a knockout. They're going to be swapping into their other Ponyta with X speed. They probably recognize that if they hit my Primeape at all without killing it, it's just going to revenge KO whatever attacked it. And then I see here that in order for them to knock out my Primeape, they're going to need another X speed. So I'm going to attack with Primeape again after attaching a Marowak. Now, unfortunately for me, they did have another X speed, so they're actually able to attack with Arcanine EX this turn, which is able to take the knockout here on my Primeape. Now, I was able to buy enough time to set up my Marowak EX, so that's what I'm going to send in. I'm actually going to use the Pokeball that I draw here for turn, even though I don't have any basics left in deck, is just in case they red card me so I don't draw a dead Pokeball. We're not going to evolve the benched Cubone, because if we do, we just die to Sabrina, and I'm going to need it to insulate my bench in just a sec. Now, if we hit double heads, the Arcanine's knocked out, which is great. But even if we don't, which, I mean, well, you'll see we don't, it isn't a huge deal as long as we hit one. Since Arcanine can't one-hit KO Marowak, this is where the Mankey we held in our hand is going to come into play. Our current board has no way to knock out the Arcanine without leaving a damaged Marowak EX inactive, but we have the Mankey in hand. So what I'm going to do when it gets to my turn after getting hit by the Arcanine EX, I'm going to actually bench the Mankey, I'll retreat into it, and then I'm going to knock out the Arcanine EX with the Mankey rather than the Marowak EX. That way my Marowak isn't just stuck inactive. Once that happens, they're going to be forced to only be able to take one prize here. So they're either going to be stuck just knocking out the Mankey inactive, or if they Sabrina, I'll just give them the benched Cubone to knock out, which it's why we wanted to keep that as a Cubone earlier rather than evolving it, because right now they have no option other than to take one prize. The Mankey is going to die to the Rapidash here, but now all I have to do is hit one heads and I'll win the game. So you see in both of these scenarios where I used Marowak, I never needed to hit both heads in order to win. All I needed was one in each situation. Also, for the record, I hadn't potioned at all yet, so there is a scenario where if my hand was different, I could have like potioned twice. And if I had done that, I actually would have been able to survive one more attack from Rapidash anyways. You'll see it didn't matter. I hit the heads. Of course, that's assuming they didn't have Blaine. If they had Blaine, they would have got me. But yeah, at that point, honestly, I wasn't even sure if they had Blaine in their deck. But yeah, thankfully I did hit heads, so I'm able to take the win there. The second matchup this is going to be like the opposite deck, or the opposite match of the previous one in terms of like what actually happened. So this is going to be against a Weezing Arbok Pidgeot deck. So I have a really fast going second hand with a Mankey lead and then Primeape in hand for next turn. The problem here is I don't have any other Pokemon to bench. So I am very susceptible to my opponent retreating their Pidgey with X speed, going into Coughing, then evolving into Weezing, which hits 30 for 1 energy plus 10 damage from poison, meaning if they have both X speed and Weezing, and I attack with Mankey, they're going to win the game on the spot. Now, since the game literally just started, I just decided to risk it. You know, it doesn't really matter if you lose a game on ladder, so maybe I would have done something differently in tournament, but this is what I did here, and you'll see it's going to pay off. So I attack on my first turn, I deal a bit of damage, set up Primeape for next turn, assuming I get one, of course. My opponent's going to switch into Coughing with X speed, but they don't have the Weezing, so they just attach to Ekans and evolve both of their Benchmons and pass. So at this point, I can already recognize that Primeape can solo their entire board. So I decide against using the Pokeball this turn just in case they have Pidgeot. I didn't want to deal with like benching a Pokemon to potentially get it gusted into active by Pidgeot without first dealing with the Arbok. So that's why I didn't use the Pokeball right away. I'll use it next turn, I believe. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and knock out the Coughing, and then my opponent's going to promote Arbok. They'll start their turn with playing a Professor's Research, I believe. Yeah, and they do actually have the Pidgeot. Probably got it off the Research, but yeah, they're going to then go ahead and attach the energy to Arbok and then deal 60 with Arbok, trapping my Primeape inactive. So that is exactly where I want it, though. So yeah, I use the Pokeball now because I recognize at this point Primeape's fully set up, but it only has 20 HP, so now my main concern is like a surprise X speed into Ekans or Coughing to be able to knock out my Primeape next turn, because I know I'm going to get the knockout on the Arbok, but that's really the only thing I'm concerned about at this point. So I just bench a Cubone in order to avoid that from happening, and then I take the knockout on Arbok. Now, Pidgeot doesn't have any way to KO me this turn, so without any way to stop the third one-hit KO of the game, my opponent's just going to concede at that point. So yeah, I thought with how different those games went, it was a good example of kind of the big difference you can have going first versus second in a deck centered around a Pokemon like Primeape. The second game obviously showed how Primeape can get out of control really fast, while the first game showcased how awkward games can get if you aren't able to cleanly set up your Primeape ASAP. Now, do the cons outweigh the pro of Primeape and Marowak EX? Like, is it too big of a deal that it's like really fragile, even though it can deal a lot of damage? I don't know. I think it depends on the context. If you're entering a tournament where you like can't afford to lose more than 2 rounds, I'd kind of be hesitant to recommend the deck. While it does counter a large percentage of the meta, Primeape gets a bit dicey if you don't go second, and Marowak EX is never going to be a surefire success in every match. I think to find success with a deck like this, you really need to be comfortable with playing a little risky in certain scenarios. So it's like, I don't know, it's really easy for games to take a sharp turn for the worse if luck isn't on your side. For the current iteration of normal PvP battles, though, I actually think this deck is a decent choice. Generally speaking, the deck either wins fast or loses fast, and since there's not like any rank ladder at the moment, you aren't penalized for losing, so it's not a big deal if the coins aren't going your way every game. As always, I hope this video is helpful. If so, I'd appreciate it if you could leave a like. Feel free to subscribe for more Pokemon TCG Pocket content. I stream most nights at twitch.tv/argmytoast. Right now, I'm mostly focusing on Pokemon TCG Pocket, but I also dabble in other Pokemon challenges like speedruns and Kaizo Ironmon. So, thanks again for watching. Have a good one. Bye-bye.